I never believed in imaginary friends until the day my son found a secret buried in our backyard that would ruin everything. It was late spring in Boston, a Wednesday just after Timmy's 17th birthday. The kind of afternoon when the breeze carried the smell of fresh-cut grass mixed with the faint aroma of Dunkin' coffee drifting from the corner shop. Too ordinary, too quiet, to warn me that something life-changing was about to unfold. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. I came home from the consulting job I'd been clinging to, only to find Timmy outside with a shovel, tearing into the soil like he was searching for buried treasure. "Dad," he said, sweat dripping down his forehead. "I know this sounds crazy, but my friend told me to dig here." I laughed at first. 17 and still talking about an imaginary friend? Maybe it was his way of clinging to childhood, or maybe just a joke. But there was something in his voice, steady, almost certain, that made me stop in my tracks. I crouched down, listening to the shovel scrape against something metallic. The sound echoed in my chest like a warning bell. He pushed aside clumps of dirt until the tip of a rusted tin box emerged. We locked eyes. He whispered, "Dad, what is this?" The box was heavy. Dirt caked into its seams. My hands shook as I pried it open. Inside were yellowed envelopes, folded papers with signatures I recognized, and one slip that froze the blood in my veins, a bank deposit receipt, dated July 14th, 2003, amount $250,000. Not my account, not my father's. It bore the signature of my brother Jonathan. I sat back on the grass, my fingers trembling as I unfolded letter after letter. They weren't just random scraps. They were contracts, correspondence between Jonathan and the family lawyer. Deals that should have included me, should have protected our father's legacy. Instead, they painted a picture of money siphoned, promises twisted, a betrayal buried literally in the dirt of my own backyard. Timmy leaned closer, his voice small. Why would Uncle Jonathan hide this here? The weight of the question pressed against my chest. I had no answer. Not yet. I remembered the summer of 2003. My father had just passed, the estate split on paper. Jonathan assured me everything was handled. I was reeling from grief, trying to keep my marriage from collapsing, too blinded by trust to notice the details. And now here it was, proof that Jonathan hadn't just handled things. He'd stolen them. I tucked the box under my arm, ushered Timmy inside. The sound of the back door closing felt final, like the moment before a storm breaks. That night, after Timmy went to bed, I spread the contents across the kitchen table. The fluorescent light hummed overhead, highlighting every crease and stain. There it was in black ink. A $250,000 deposit into an account I'd never heard of. A letter from Jonathan to the lawyer, dated August 2003, ensure Mason remains uninformed until matters are settled. A property transfer form, unsigned but bearing my father's name typed neatly at the bottom. My father had trusted Jonathan to manage the estate, and I had trusted them both. I poured myself a glass of bourbon, staring at the papers until the lines blurred. Memories came rushing back. Jonathan brushing me off when I asked about statements, assuring me legal fees eat up most of it, don't worry. My father's voice weakened by illness saying, "Jonathan will take care of it. You focus on your family." God. If only he knew. The next morning, Timmy found me still at the table. His eyes darted across the documents. He wasn't a child anymore. He could read the betrayal as clearly as I could. "Dad," he asked quietly, "is this why we Sev always struggled? Why you worked nights? Why Mom left?" The words cut deeper than any blade. My wife's departure years ago had been tangled in money fights, unpaid bills, the slow erosion of security, and maybe, just maybe, this was the rot that had started it all. I couldn't set lie to him. "Yes," I whispered, "I think your uncle stole what was ours." We sat in silence, the hum of the refrigerator filling the room. For the first time in years, I felt the raw edge of rage scraping against my ribs. That Saturday, I drove to Cambridge, to the brick townhouse Jonathan had inherited from my father. He opened the door with that smug half-smile I'd hated since childhood. "Mason, to what do I owe this surprise?" I held his gaze, forcing my voice steady. "Found something in my yard, a tin box, letters, a bank slip." His smile faltered for a fraction of a second. So brief, I almost missed it, but it was enough. I don't know what you think you Stev found, he said smoothly, but digging up dirt one ship changed the past. He leaned against the doorframe, casual, but his eyes betrayed him, a flicker of fear. You robbed me, Jonathan, I said. You robbed Dad Sep's legacy, and I will prove it. For a moment, neither of us moved. The city sounds carried over the street, car horns, footsteps, a Red Sox game playing faintly from a neighbor's radio, life going on, while my family's truth cracked open like rotten wood. He finally stepped back, closing the door with a calmness that chilled me, but I saw his hand tremble as he gripped the knob. When I returned home, Timmy was waiting. He didn't ask what Jonathan said. He didn't have to. He saw it in my face. That night, I locked the tin box in my office drawer, sliding the key onto my keychain. I underlined the date on the $250,000. Slip July 14th, 2003. A date I would not forget. Because this wasn't just money. This was decades of trust, stolen. My father's voice silenced. My marriage destroyed. My son left wondering if his childhood had been built on lies. And it all started with an imaginary friend who told him where to dig. The betrayal wasn't a wound anymore. It was a fuse, lit and burning. And I realized something bitterly true. Trust doesn't shatter in an instant. It erodes grain by grain until you're standing in the ruins. I thought I had braced myself for the weight of betrayal, but nothing prepares you for the kind that festers for decades. After finding that tin box, it was like every surface in my house echoed with ghosts. My father's voice, my brother's laughter, my wife's accusations when bills piled up. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me, the faint tick of the clock in the hallway marking time like a metronome. I kept hearing Jonathan's voice from the doorstep, digging up dirt one sit change the past. But this wasn't dirt, it was rot, and rot spreads. By morning I felt hollowed out. Timmy sat at the kitchen counter with cereal, watching me as I shuffled papers back into the tin box. His eyes were sharp, too sharp for a 17-year-old. Dad, he said softly, you look like you didn't sleep at all. I didn't then it. I wanted to protect him, shield him from this mess. But the truth was already seeping into him, and lies would only build walls between us. He hesitated. Do you think Mom knew? The question slammed into me. My wife had left 7 years ago, taking her silence with her. We'd fought about money, about security, about how she was tired of scraping by. But had she known the truth, that Jonathan had buried our inheritance while I worked myself to exhaustion, I'll never know. I gripped the edge of the counter, the laminate cool against my palms. If she did, I said carefully, she never told me. Timmy nodded, but his eyes stayed fixed on me, searching for cracks in my voice. He didn't find any. Not yet. That day was a blur. The consulting firm called about a project in Worcester, but I couldn't focus. I kept opening my desk drawer, staring at the key that locked the box away, like a child afraid of the monster under the bed. By late afternoon, the storm hit, literally. Thunder rolled across Boston, rain hammering against the windows. I poured bourbon into a glass, the clink of ice against crystal sounding too loud in the empty kitchen. I spread the letters across the table again, every word a knife. One envelope, dated September 2003, caught my attention. My father's name typed neatly at the bottom of a property transfer form, but the signature space blank. It was supposed to be his house. My house. The home Jonathan had kept. I dropped the paper, my breath shaking. My chest felt like it was caving in. I whispered into the storm, though no one could hear me. He stole everything. The bourbon burned down my throat. But it didn't warn me. It just widened the hollow inside. At some point, Timmy wandered in, barefoot, hair messy from a nap. He stopped when he saw the table. The stormlight flickered against his face. Dad, he said, voice small, why are you doing this to yourself? You already know what he did. I clenched my jaw, fighting the urge to scream. Because knowing isn't enough. Because evidence is a cage unless you use it. Instead, I said, I have to understand how deep this goes. Otherwise, he wins. Timmy didn't argue. He just pulled out a chair and sat across from me, silent, his presence both comforting and unbearable. By midnight, I was pacing the kitchen, letters in hand. My thoughts spiraled into places I didn't want to admit. Revenge, exposure, justice. But I couldn't see the path yet. And then my father Sip's voice came back to me. Not real, but a memory from a hospital room years ago. Mason, you Sipter, the steady one, don't let anger eat you alive. I broke. My knees buckled, and I sank onto the floor, clutching the tin box to my chest. For the first time in years, I sobbed. Timmy rushed over, kneeling beside me. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. He put his hand on my shoulder, and in that moment, I wasn't just a father. I was a broken man, collapsing under decades of lies. When I finally caught my breath, I whispered, I don't know what to do. Timmy squeezed my shoulder gently. Then maybe we find someone who does. His words lingered in the storm-filled silence. The next morning, I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. The line rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Hello? James, I croaked. It's Mason. I need your help. James O'Connor, an old family friend, now a private investigator. The kind of man who knew how to follow a trail without leaving footprints. There was a pause on the line, then a sigh. Mason, it's been what, 15 years? Closer to 20, I admitted. My voice cracked. I wouldn't be calling if it wasn't important. Another pause, then a shift in his tone. Professional, focused, tell me everything. I looked at the tin box on the table, at Timmy hovering in the doorway. For the first time since the discovery, I felt the faintest spark of direction. So I told him about the backyard, the imaginary friend, the $250,000 slip, the letters, Jonathan's smirk. When I finished, James said quietly, You are not crazy. This isn't just betrayal. This is theft, fraud, maybe worse. I said or come by tomorrow. We said or go through it together. I hung up, my hands trembling. I turned to Timmy, who was still watching me. His eyes were wet, though he tried to hide it. Dad, he said softly, I don't care about the money. I just don't want you to break. The storm outside began to quiet, but the storm inside me raged on. I placed a hand on his shoulder and whispered, I wanted break, son. Not anymore. If Jonathan wants a war, he's finally going to get one. James O'Connor showed up the next morning at 9:02 a.m. sharp, trench coat damp with yesterday's storm, coffee in one hand and a narrow, leather-bound notebook in the other. Friday sunlight sliced across my kitchen table, turning the spread of letters and bank slips into a battlefield map. Timmy hovered by the doorway, pretending to scroll his phone but listening to every breath. James set the coffee down, flipped his notebook open, and spoke in the same low, methodical tone I remembered from years ago. We are going to do this clean, Mason. No shortcuts, no cowboy moves. Paper beats memory and certified beats a handshake. Start with what you can prove. I pushed the tin box forward. Prove this. He lifted the $250,000 deposit receipt between two fingers, not touching the original ink. July 14th, 2003. Citizens Bank, Back Bay Branch, Boylston Street. Teller ID 6729. Account ending in 1184. He glanced up. That last bit alone is a thread we can pull. Timmy stepped closer. How do we pull it? James half smiled at him. Patiently. He tapped the notebook. We build a timeline, day by day, document by document. We'll request statements and correspondence properly. Banks keep microfilm and digital archives. 15 to 20 years isn't unusual. We'll file targeted requests under your rights as an interested party to your father's estate, and we'll subpoena if the bank plays hardball later. I nodded, feeling my breath steady for the first time. Where do we start today? James pointed his pen. Suffolk County Registry of Deeds. He tapped the unsigned property transfer form. You said this concerns your father Seppa's house. Cambridge, I said. Willow Street. Brick townhouse. Jonathan S. been nesting there like it hatched him. Cambridge makes it Middlesex, not Suffolk, he corrected gently. Already writing. Middlesex South Registry in Cambridge. 208 Cambridge Street. We pull the full chain of title, deeds, homesteads, liens, assignments. If there's a transfer after your father's death in 2003, it will be recorded. If anything looks rushed or irregular, wrong dates, mismatched acknowledgments, missing notary commissions, we flag it. Timmy Sip's eyes sharpened. How do you know what Sip's irregular? James slid him the notebook so he could see the printed checklist tucked inside. Grantor grantee names, book and page, instrument type, dates of execution and recording, notary name and commission expiration, consideration amount, parcel ID. Because crooks are sloppy in the margins, James said. And lawyers who help them leave fingerprints they don't let realize will fluoresce under daylight. We left at 10:15 a.m. The three of us in my old Honda, driving the Mass Ave route toward Cambridge. Timmy manned the notes on my phone, creating a shared folder labeled Carter v. Carter, Evidence. He set subfolders without me asking. Bank, deeds, correspondence, affidavits, timeline. I caught his reflection in the rear view, jaw set. Eyes forward. Not a boy. Not anymore. The registry Sipsub's fluorescent lights buzzed like bees. We requested the index search by my father Sips's name and the Willow Street parcel ID, then paged through bound volumes and terminal screens. At 11:32 a.m., Timmy whispered, "Dad, look." There it was. Instrument, Personal Representative's Deed. Grantor. Estate of Thomas Carter by Jonathan Carter. PR. Execution. Date August 21st. 2003. Recording date September 4th, 2003. Consideration $10. Transfer to My Stomach Clenched. Jonathan Carter, an individual. James circled the dates in my printed copy. Your father died June 29th, 2003. Appointment of personal representative would have needed probate letters. Letters of authority from Middlesex Probate and Family Court. We pull that docket next. The $10 consideration is a common trick. Family transfer, but it doesn't wash away fiduciary duties. If he self-dealt while you were a beneficiary, that's breach of duty territory. I felt heat rise in my neck. He signed a deed as PR to himself? On paper, James said, that SEP's not automatically illegal. In practice, it SEP's a minefield. If notice requirements weren't SEP met, if the inventory was incomplete, if he failed to account to you as an heir, if he certified false statements, it opens doors. Timmy leaned over the counter. So what do we do? James answered without looking up. We build a clean file, then we walk it through the front door of the courthouse. By 1:05 p.m., we'd paid for certified copies. The PR deed, Book 5, 9214, page 118. The prior deed into my father, Book 5, 1109, page 77, and the recorded homestead. James wrote the receipt number on the back. $28, receipt hash 674229. I slid it into a new red folder Timmy had labeled Registry. We drove to the Middlesex Probate and Family Court on Cambridge Street and requested the estate of Thomas Carter docket. The clerk brought out a beige file that smelled like the early 2000s ink and dust. Inside, petition for probate, July 7th. 2003 letters of authority to Jonathan Carter, July 24th, 2003. Inventory filed. James skimmed, frowning. No inventory here. There should be an inventory listing the real property and bank accounts, typically within 3 months. If it's missing, we note it. He jotted inventory not in file, confirm via docket printout. We copied the letters of authority and the docket sheet. Timmy photographed each page, naming files 2003-07-24 letters of authority.pdf and docket_summary.pdf before uploading to our shared drive. Back home by 3:30 p.m., James spread everything across the table like a defense surgeon prepping for a careful operation. Next steps, targeted bank requests. You draft a letter to Citizens Bank, Back Bay Branch. Requesting archive statements for account ending in 1184, July, September 2003, referencing your interest as an heir and attaching the probate letters. Don't ask for the world. Ask for exact months tied to the deposit date. He dictated, and I typed. Subject request for archive statements. Citizens bank account ending 1184 July, September 2003. Attachments. Letters of authority July 24, 2003. PR deed September 4, 2003. Reference deposit receipt Desert 714 Sedozen 3. Teller ID 6729, Back Bay Branch. Delivery certified mail, return receipt requested. Send it certified, he said. Green card. We want signatures. Timmy Sips's voice was quiet but firm. What about the lawyer Uncle worked with? James nodded. We won set tip him off yet. First we log his name and bar number. Pull public discipline history. Later, if the facts justify it, a confidential bar complaint isn't set vengeance. It's set's duty. We do that only when the record is airtight. I opened my father's letter again, the one with his typed name and that blank signature line. A detail I'd missed at 2 a.m. now glared under afternoon light. The notary acknowledgement block had a commission expiration August 5, 2003, but the deed execution date was August 21, 2003. James, I said, breath catching, this notary SIP's commission expiration predates the execution. He was already leaning over my shoulder. Could be a clerical error, could be a notary using an expired commission. He met my eyes. Either way, we request the notary's journal. Massachusetts law requires chronological entries, date, signer, type of document. If there's no entry for August 21, 2003, or if the commission was expired, that acknowledgement is vulnerable. I felt a low, steady drumbeat rise in my chest, focus replacing fury. So we request the notary journal. James nodded. From the Secretary of the Commonwealth SIP's Notary Public Office or directly from the notary depending on retention. We shall do both, politely, on letterhead. He slid a drafted form across the table. I already keep templates. At 5:12 p.m. we printed the letters Citizens Bank, Notary Journal Request, and a records request to the probate clerk for the missing inventory, citing MUP 6 Section 3 MICE 706. Timmy fed each into the envelopes, sealing them like he was closing vault doors. I wrote the dates in my ledger, May 23, 2025. Friday, 3 certified mail tracking numbers, underlined twice. As the sun lowered, James packed his notebook. One more thing, you such are gonna get an itch to call Jonathan don't tut. Let him keep underestimating you. Let him wonder what you know and where you such you'll say it. Where I still say it? I asked. James's smile was the thinnest blade. In a courtroom, Mason, with a judge, a docket number, and the truth under oath. After he left, Timmy and I stood at the window watching the mail truck pull away with our letters, 3 small ships carrying our case toward land. He bumped his shoulder gently against mine. We SIP are really doing this. I rested my hand on his back. We are, slowly, cleanly. I looked at the red folder, at the green certified slips clipped to the front, and pictured a different room, the quiet tension of a courtroom in Boston, the wooden pews creaking, a clerk calling, Carter v. Carter, and my voice steady into a microphone. For the first time since the shovel hit metal, I could see the shape of the ending. Not a brawl on a doorstep, a reckoning under lights. And Jonathan? He wouldn't hear it coming until the gavel did. I mailed the letters on Friday, May 23rd. By Monday morning, 3 green tracking slips sat taped to the inside of my ledger, each marked with bold numbers I underlined twice. Those slips weren't just receipts, they were anchors. Proof that the system now carried my words forward. Boston woke muggy that Monday, the kind of May heat that makes shirts stick to your back. I sat at my kitchen table, coffee gone cold, scrolling through Citizens Bank's website, watching the tracking status update, delivered signed for by L. Green, 9:42 a.m. My chest tightened. The bank had it. The rope was tied. Now all I had to do was start pulling. Timmy came down the stairs, backpack slung over one shoulder. Anything yet? Bank-confirmed receipt, I said, sliding the laptop toward him. We wait, maybe a week. He smirked. A week feels like a year right now. He wasn't as dead wrong, but waiting didn't mean standing still. James had drilled that into me. While the paper moves, he said, you build the frame. So that day we started framing. I pulled out the red registry folder, the certified copies from Middlesex Registry of Deeds. Each document was sleeved in plastic, labeled in Timmy's neat handwriting. Book 5, 9214, page 118. Jonathan Carter, PR deed to Jonathan Carter. Individual, consideration $10. Execution August 21st, 2003. Recording September 4th, 2003. I stared at the notary block again, the expiration date glaring at me like a warning flare. If that commission was expired, the acknowledgement was rotten. At noon, James called. Mason. Just got confirmation. Probate clerk faxed me a docket printout. No inventory filed. His voice hardened. That SIP's breach of duty straight out of the gate. Executors can skip an inventory. It's SIP's statutory. He swore an oath to do it. I gripped the phone tighter. So he was appointed, signed the deed to himself, and never filed an inventory? That SEP's what it looks like, James said. We'll still confirm when we get the clerk's SEP's certification, but Mason, this is no longer suspicion. This is a pattern. We are tightening the noose. That night, after Timmy went to bed, I opened a fresh folder, Legal Actions. I printed out a blank probate court complaint form, stapled Massachusetts General Laws C.190b Section 3706, failure to file inventory to the top, and highlighted passages about fiduciary duty. The yellow ink glowed under the lamp like warning tape. I whispered to myself, every paper is a brick. Build the wall, then make him crash into it. By Thursday, Citizens Bank responded. A thick white envelope arrived by certified mail. I slid it open at the kitchen counter, hands sweating. Inside 3 monthly statements for account ending 1184, dated July, August, September 2003. The July statement told the story. Deposit $250,000. July 14th, 2003. Branch Back Bay Teller, $6,729. Balance before $143. Balance after $250,143. My throat tightened as I scanned further. August 2003, withdrawals in chunks. $40,000, $60,000, transfers to another account ending 9,921. By September, the account sat nearly drained. Timmy leaned over my shoulder, jaw-dropping. He just took it? I slid the paper into a sleeve. Not just took it, laundered it through accounts. We still need to trace the 9,921 number. I called James immediately. He whistled low. That SIP's game-changing. You now have proof of deposit and transfers out. Coupled with the deed and missing inventory, this is just shady. It's SIP's actionable. What SIP's our next move? I asked. First, secure your evidence properly. Fireproof safe, multiple digital scans. Second, draft a petition to compel accounting in probate court. Force him to produce every record he's since withheld since 2003. If he consent, he's since in violation. If he lies, he risks perjury. The word echoed in my kitchen, perjury. That Friday evening, I drove to Staples in Woburn and bought a fireproof safe. Timmy helped me carry it into the basement, grunting under the weight. We set it against the cement wall, bolted it down, and I slid the red registry folder, the bank statements, and the tin box inside. The key went on my ring next to the office drawer key. Feels like a vault, Timmy said, stepping back. It is, I told him. This is our armory. 2 weeks later, James and I sat in a quiet conference room at the law library in downtown Boston. Stacks of statutes surrounded us, the hum of fluorescent lights above. He slid a draft across the table. Petition to compel accounting. Estate of Thomas Carter, docket hash 2003 E1121 MI. The words jolted me. My father's name tied to a case number on paper I could carry into court. This is step one, James said. The judge won't bail of a 20-year delay, but once you show the bank records, the deed, and the missing inventory, you still have good cause. The duty never expired. He was supposed to account. He didn't. I signed the draft with a trembling hand, the pen scratching like a verdict. Jonathan called that night. First time in weeks. His voice came smooth, practiced. Mason, I hear you Seb been digging again. Do you have any idea what you Seb's starting? I didn't answer right away. I let the silence stretch, let him wonder. Finally I said, starting? No, Jonathan.
Ain't sis been finishing.
He chuckled, but I caught the strain under it. Yusef always been dramatic. Paper one tin save you. Lawyers one tin save you. And certainly Timmy one tin save you. The mention of my son sent a spark of fury down my spine. Leave him out of this. Then stop, Jonathan hissed. Because once this goes public, you still wish you sent left the past buried. I ended the call without another word, staring at the safe in the corner of my study. For the first time I realized Jonathan wasn't untouchable anymore. He was rattled. And when men like Jonathan rattle, they make mistakes. By early June I filed the petition. I stood at the counter of Middlesex Probate and Family Court, the clerk stamping my papers with a sharp thunk. Docket entry. Petition to compel accounting filed June 3, 2025. Walking out into the humid Cambridge air, I felt something I hadn't in months. Not relief, not triumph, but momentum. The wheel was turning, and Jonathan was tied to it whether he knew it or not. That night Timmy asked, "What happens now?" Now I told him, "We wait for the court date. But Jonathan doesn't know what else we have, and that sips the advantage." I pictured the courtroom, pews creaking, clerk calling Carter v. Carter. Jonathan's smugness faltering as evidence landed one after another. I sipped my bourbon and whispered to myself, "Every paper is a brick. The wall is rising." And soon Jonathan would slam right into it. The petition was filed, the docket stamped, and yet I knew this was only the opening salvo. Jonathan thrived in shadows, backroom deals, whispered agreements, papers signed when no one was looking. If I wanted to win, I couldn't just wait for a court date. I had to pull him out into the light, inch by inch, until there was nowhere left to hide. James called me that Monday morning, his voice clipped. I traced the second account, the one ending in 9921. It was at Fleet Boston back in 2003, later absorbed into Bank of America. Transfers matched the withdrawals from the Citizens account. Guess whose name it seps under? My chest tightened. Jonathan sits, and your family lawyer sips. Joint account. Both signatures authorized. I gripped the counter. The phone pressed hard to my ear. The betrayal deepened like a wound split open. So the lawyer wasn't such just complicit. He was a partner. Exactly. That's why we don't tip our hand too soon, James said. You got leverage. Keep building. That week, I worked like a man possessed. Each evening after my consulting hours, Timmy and I sat at the dining table, the red registry folder and blue bank folder spread wide. We scanned documents, labeled them carefully. 2030-714 deposit, 2030-810 transfer 9921, 2030-902 withdrawal 60K. Timmy created a spreadsheet, columns for date, amount, account, note. He typed in silence, the rhythmic click of keys echoing in the house. It struck me how he'd slipped into this role, partner, archivist, soldier. At one point he looked up, eyes steady. "Dad, do you think Uncle ever cared about family? Or was it always money?" I exhaled slowly. I think for Jonathan money was family, control was love. That's what makes it so dangerous. On June 12th, a letter arrived from the court. Hearing on petition to compel accounting scheduled July 9th, 2025, 10 a.m. Courtroom 4, Middlesex Probate and Family Court. I ran my fingers over the embossed seal. A date, a place. No more vague battles in the dark. A courtroom was coming. But I wasn't naive. Jonathan wouldn't wait quietly. 2 days later, The Boston Globe ran a small column in its business section. Local consultant faces family dispute over inheritance. It painted me as a bitter brother, reopening wounds from 2003, unwilling to move on. The timing was too sharp, the language too familiar. Jonathan had friends in press offices, always had. Timmy slammed the paper down. "He's trying to smear you before court?" I nodded grimly. "Which means he sets worried." So I pushed back, quietly. James helped me draft an anonymous tip to the Globe's investigative desk, attaching copies of the Citizens Bank statement and the suspicious deed. No commentary, just documents, facts. 3 days later, a reporter called me. I didn't confirm or deny. I just said, "Check the docket. It's public record." Then I hung up. If Jonathan wanted to play with shadows, I'd feed light into every corner. Meanwhile, James pulled a gem from the notary records. The notary who had acknowledged Jonathan's deed in 2003. Commission expired August 5th, 2003. The deed was executed August 21st. No valid commission, the acknowledgement was worthless. He slid the copy across my table one evening. "This Mason is dynamite. Without a valid acknowledgement, the deed SIP's recordability is compromised. If the court accepts that, Jonathan SIP's title to the house is shaky. Very shaky." I stared at the date, the black and white proof of a crack in Jonathan Epps' foundation. So the house could be clawed back. James finished. "At minimum, it undermines his credibility." I leaned back, a long breath escaping. The house wasn't just brick and mortar. It was my father's voice, my childhood Christmases, my late wife's laughter when we first moved in as newlyweds. It was everything Jonathan had said belonged to him alone. Now, maybe it could be mine again. That weekend, Timmy and I drove by Willow Street. We parked down the block, watching the townhouse as evening lights flicked on inside. Jonathan's silhouette passed by the front window, still smug, still untouchable in his mind. Timmy broke the silence. "One day he SIP's going to sit in that courtroom, and you SIP's going to look him in the eye. Do you think you SIPs'll forgive him?" Forgiveness. The word felt foreign in my mouth. "No," I said softly. "Forgiveness isn't set owed where there SEP's no remorse. But justice is non-negotiable." By late June, our evidence was airtight. The folders stacked like bricks in a fortress. Registry, bank, notary, court. Each labeled, scanned, copied, and locked in the fireproof safe. James summarized our position in one line. He took $250,000, self-dealt the estate, sipped his real property, failed to inventory, used an invalid notary, and partnered with counsel to siphon funds. That SIPT is not just betrayal. It SIPT is fraud, breach of duty, and potential conspiracy. I sat at my desk that night, typing notes, when an email pinged. Subject line, "Drop it." No address, no signature. Just 2 words in bold black. I called James immediately. He chuckled dryly. Classic intimidation attempt. "Log it, print it, and don't respond. It sets evidence now." I printed it, marked the date and time, June 28th, 2025, 11:07 p.m., filed it under Misk Slers, another brick in the wall. As July approached, the house filled with quiet tension. Timmy's graduation photos still sat on the mantel, but his eyes in them looked older now, hardened by truths a 17-year-old shouldn't have to carry. One evening, he caught me staring at the safe. "You still ready for this, Dad? More ready than you think." I put my hand on his shoulder, voice low. "I sittin' ready, because this isn't set just about me. It's SIP's about us, and about Dad, and about every lie Jonathan thought he could bury." The safe clicked shut, the key cold in my palm. In less than 2 weeks, a clerk would call out Carter v. Carter in a courtroom, and Jonathan would finally face the light he'd spent decades avoiding. And I said'd be there, steady, every brick in place. July crept in hot and heavy, the kind of New England summer that makes the air feel like wet cloth on your skin. Each day ticked closer to July 9th, our court date, and each day Jonathan's pressure grew louder, dirtier, more desperate. On July 2nd, a letter slid under my front door. No envelope, no return address. Just a single sheet of paper with blocky black font. Walk away, Mason, or we bury you. I sat at the kitchen table reading the words over and over until Timmy found me. His eyes widened. Dad, I cut him off, folding it carefully. It's Sep's intimidation. That's Sep's all, and it's Sep's going in the file. I slid the sheet into a plastic sleeve, labeled it Threat February 25th, '07, and placed it in the blue misc/threats folder. Another brick. Another sign Jonathan was cracking. That evening, James arrived, his tie loose, sleeves rolled. He carried a recorder, the kind with time-stamped files. He set it on my table. We set her upping the ante, he said. From tonight, record every call with Jonathan. He sets rattled and rattled men talk too much. Massachusetts is a two-party state, so you don't set bait him. You let him bait himself. If he slips, we notarize the transcript. Understand? I nodded, loud and clear. The first slip came quicker than I expected. July 3rd, 8:14 p.m., phone buzzing against the counter. Jonathan. Still playing lawyer, Mason? His voice dripped smugness, but there was an edge under it. Just preparing for July 9th. He laughed, but it cracked. You think a judge cares about your little box of dirt? Dad left everything to me. Everyone knows that. That's not what the deed says, I replied calmly. Pause too long, then a hiss. You don't stut understand the deals I made. You don't stut know who I had to keep quiet. My thumb hovered over the recorder button, already lit red. My heart raced. He had said too much. Jonathan, I said softly, thank you. Then I hung up. James transcribed it the next morning, attaching the audio file. We notarized the transcript that afternoon at a UPS store on Main Street. The clerk's stamp hit the paper with a sharp thunk. Dated July 4th, 2025. Independence Day, fittingly enough. But Jonathan didn't stop. On July 5th, a manila envelope arrived in my mailbox. Inside old credit card bills, all in my name, all forged with charges from 2004, luxury hotels, restaurants, things I never touched. At the bottom, a sticky note, see you in court, J. Timmy nearly tore the papers in half when he saw them. He sets framing you. James examined them, frowning, sloppy. These look like photocopies spliced together. We have a forensic document examiner ready. If he files these as evidence, we tear them apart. Still, the brazenness made my stomach knot. Jonathan wasn't just afraid. He was desperate enough to falsify records. On July 6th, I secured affidavits from two old family friends. Mrs. Callahan, our neighbor from Willow Street, swore she saw movers hauling boxes into Jonathan's townhouse in August. 2003, weeks after Dad died, before probate even closed. Diaz, Dad's golf buddy, testified that Dad always said the house would be Mason's. We notarized both affidavits at 2:45 p.m., the stamp smudging slightly on Mr. Diaz's signature. I slipped them into the green AF is a bits folder, logged with the date. Every voice mattered, every memory stacked against Jonathan's lies. July 7th, 2 days before court. The house felt charged, as though the walls themselves hummed with tension. Timmy paced the living room, rehearsing my answers out loud, pretending to be the judge. State your name for the record. Mason Carter. And why are you bringing this petition 22 years late? Because fraud has no expiration, Your Honor. Because my father says trust wasn't sent, just misplaced. It was stolen. He stopped pacing, looked at me seriously. Yusef got this, Dad. I smiled, but the weight pressed hard on my chest. What if I didn't? What if Jonathan twisted it all again? That night, the storm hit. Thunder rolled across Boston, shaking the windows. Rain hammered the roof, relentless. And then bang, 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 a fist on my front door. Timmy froze. I motioned him back. Slowly, I opened the door a crack. No one there, just an envelope, waterlogged from the storm. Inside, a photo of my house, our house taken from across the street, a scribbled line, "You Setter being watched." My hand shook, but I sealed it in plastic, labeled it Threat August 25th, '07, and slid it into the folder. Jonathan's shadow games weren't breaking me. They were fortifying me. On July 8th, the day before court, James and I met in a quiet office above a bakery in Somerville. The air smelled of bread and sugar. Strangely calming, we spread everything across the table. Citizens' bank statements with the $250K deposit and withdrawals. Fleet Boston / BOA joint account records with Jonathan and the lawyers' names. Registry of Deeds copies showing the PR deed. Notary Commission expiration mismatch. Affidavits from Callahan and Diaz. Threat letters and emails. Transcribed call from 0703. James tapped the table. This isn't just enough to compel an accounting. This is enough to crack him open. I exhaled slowly, staring at the mountain of proof. Tomorrow we bring it to light. Timmy placed a hand on my arm. Tomorrow, he said firmly, we end this. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window watching the street lamps glow on wet pavement, the city unusually quiet. My reflection in the glass looked older, wearier, but steadier too. I whispered into the silence. Dad, tomorrow, I shall speak for both of us. And as the clock struck midnight, I closed the safe one last time, the click echoing like a gavel. Jonathan had spent 22 years hiding in shadows. Tomorrow, in courtroom 4, the shadows would be stripped away. July 9th, 2025. A Wednesday. I woke before dawn, the city still wrapped in a gray hush. Boston's skyline stood sharp against the rising sun. But all I saw was the courthouse in Cambridge, waiting like a stone colossus. Today wasn't just about evidence. Today was about 22 years of silence cracking wide open. I dressed carefully, navy suit, red tie my father once gave me. The knot tight but steady. Timmy wore a white shirt, sleeves rolled, his youth shadowed by the seriousness in his eyes. He carried the leather briefcase we'd packed the night before, folders stacked neatly, each tab color-coded: bank, registry, notary, affidavits, threats. When we arrived at the courthouse, the air was already thick with July heat. Reporters clustered outside, cameras clicking, microphones shoved forward. The Boston Globe's smear piece had stirred curiosity, and Jonathan's allies had whispered just enough to draw eyes. One reporter called out, "Mr. Carter, is this just a family feud?" I kept walking, Timmy at my side. "It sets not a feud," I said calmly. "It sets fraud, and today you sets a hear it in court." Courtroom 4 smelled of polished wood and history. The pews creaked as people settled, family acquaintances, curious lawyers, even strangers drawn by the headlines. Jonathan sat at the respondent's table, flanked by his attorney, our so-called family lawyer. Jonathan wore a tailored gray suit, his tie perfect, his smile tight. He looked at me as though this were just another poker game. The clerk called the case. Carter petition to compel accounting. Judge O'Smalley, silver-haired and stern, presided from the bench. His gavel struck once. Proceed. My attorney James had connected me with a probate specialist. Miss Connors rose first. Your Honor, this petition is about transparency and duty. Mr. Mason Carter, an heir to the estate of Thomas Carter, has never received an inventory or accounting since his father's death in 2003. Instead, we have evidence of self-dealing, concealed transfers, and potential fraud. Jonathan Sepp's attorney shot up immediately. Objection to characterization. This is nothing more than a disgruntled sibling reopening old wounds. The judge raised a hand. We settle, let the evidence speak. Continue. I was called to the stand. The oath felt heavy as I raised my hand, but my voice was steady. State your name. Mason Carter. Mr. Carter, why are you bringing this petition now, over 2 decades later? I met the Judge Sepp's eyes. Because fraud has no expiration. Because my father Sepp's trust wasn't Sepp's misplaced. It was stolen. And because my son found the proof Jonathan buried. Whispers rippled through the courtroom. Miss Connors handed me the Citizens Bank statement. What is this, Mr. Carter? Monthly statement, July 2003. Deposit of $250,000. Made by my brother Jonathan into account ending 1184. Teller ID 6729. Back Bay Branch. Is this your father Rhett's account? No. It was opened by Jonathan after my father Sip's death, without disclosure. The judge leaned forward. And the source of these funds? I swallowed. Estate proceeds. Money meant to be shared between heirs. Connors presented the registry deed. Mr. Carter, what does this document show? That my brother, acting as personal representative, executed a deed on August 21st, 2003, transferring my father Sip's townhouse on Willow Street to himself for $10. Gasps fluttered across the room. Jonathan shifted in his seat, jaw tightening. And Your Honor, Connors added, note the notary acknowledgement, commission expired August 5th, 2003, execution August 21st. Invalid on its face. The judge frowned, adjusting his glasses. Notary expired, that would indeed compromise acknowledgement. He scribbled notes. Then came the recording. James had queued it up, time-stamped, notarized. Connors pressed play. Jonathan Sepp's voice filled the courtroom, tinny but clear. You don't set understand the deals I made. You don't set know who I had to keep quiet. The room went silent. Every head turned toward Jonathan. His face flushed crimson, his lawyer whispering frantically in his ear. Mr. Carter, the judge said slowly, did you just admit in your own words to concealing deals and silencing parties? Jonathan stammered. That was taken out of context. Context will be weighed. The judge cut in sharply. But the words are plain. Connors then called Mrs. Callahan and Mr. Diaz. Their voices wove threads of memory, movers hauling boxes before probate closed. Dad Sip's repeated assurance that the house would be Mason Sip's. Jonathan's attorney tried to discredit them, but each stood firm, their testimony signed and notarized. Finally, Connors presented the intimidation letters, the forged credit card bills. She held them high. Your Honor, since this petition was filed, Mr. Carter has received threats, fabricated documents, and surveillance photos, all designed to silence him. The judge Sip's face hardened. He turned to Jonathan. Do you deny responsibility for these? Jonathan's smile cracked. He looked to his attorney, then back at the judge. I have no knowledge. But his voice wavered. Everyone heard it. Then came the twist. Connors dropped the final exhibit, Fleet Boston Slench Bank of America joint account records. Your Honor, these records show the 2003 transfers from account 1184 went directly into a joint account in the names of Jonathan Carter and his attorney. The courtroom exploded in murmurs. The judge Sip's gavel struck hard. Order! Order! Jonathan's attorney went pale, fumbling papers. The betrayal was no longer hidden. It was exposed, written in ink, bank seals intact. I looked at Jonathan across the room. For the first time, his eyes were set, smug. They were wide, frantic. He mouthed something, stop. But I didn't stop. When testimony closed, Judge O'Malley leaned back, silent for a long minute. Then he spoke, voice firm. This court finds sufficient cause to compel a full accounting of the estate of Thomas Carter. Mr. Jonathan Carter is hereby ordered to produce, within 30 days, all records, statements, and inventories from 2003 to present. Failure to comply will result in contempt proceedings and potential referral to the Attorney General's office for investigation of fraud. The gavel struck. Boom. It was done. Outside, reporters swarmed. Cameras flashed, microphones shoved forward. How do you feel, Mr. Carter? I looked at Timmy, his hand gripping mine. Then I faced the cameras. For 22 years I lived under a lie. Today the truth stood in court. Justice doesn't Senate erase betrayal, but it shines a light no lie can hide. Jonathan tried to slip past the crowd, but questions pelted him. Why did you hide the deposit? Why was your notary expired? Why is your lawyer's name on the joint account? His gray suit, once armor, now looked like a noose tightening around him. Timmy leaned close, whispering, You did it, Dad. I whispered back. No, son, we did. That night, back home, I unlocked the safe one last time. I placed the transcript, the affidavits, and the judge's signed order inside. The click echoed through the basement. For the first time in years, I felt the house breathe again. Lighter, freer, my father Sip's voice seemed to echo in the quiet. Mason, you sept a steady one. And steady I had been. The morning after court felt different, like the house had exhaled for the first time in 2 decades. Sunlight spilled across the kitchen floor in long gold bands, and even the old refrigerator hum sounded less like a complaint and more like a song that had finally found its chorus. The judge's order lay on the table, crisp, embossed, undeniable, 30 days to account, or face contempt and referral. Timmy padded in, hair a mess, eyes bright in a way I hadn't seen since he was small. Did we actually win? He asked. We won the right to see the truth, I said, pouring him orange juice. The rest is the cleanup. Cleanup came fast. On July 10th, Miss Connors filed a formal notice of order with the court and served Jonathan by courier at the Willow Street townhouse. Signature logged at 11:13 a.m. by T. Rivas. By noon, she'd filed requests for production. Complete bank ledgers for accounts ending 1184 and 9921. All probate correspondence since July 7, 2003. Any and all inventories, accountings, and notices mailed to heirs. She copied the Board of Bar Overseers on a notice regarding potential professional misconduct by Jonathan's attorney, carefully marked for information only pending court accounting. Clean, lawful, audible. By July 12th, things broke in the public square. The Boston Globe's business desk ran a follow-up, this time with documents. Side-by-side scans, the July 2003 $250,000 deposit, the PR deed with the expired notary commission, and the court's order compelling an accounting. The headline avoided drama but landed like a sledgehammer. Probate court orders accounting in Carter estate after new evidence surfaces. Cameras returned to Willow Street. Neighbors watched from porches. For once, Jonathan didn't preen for attention. He hid behind curtains. James called that afternoon. He sits boxed in, Mason. He may try a partial accounting dump paper to look compliant. We submit it with line-by-line reconciliation. No drama, just math. No drama, just math. I wrote that on a yellow sticky note and stuck it to the safe. On July 15th, an envelope arrived by courier, thick as a paperback. Preliminary accounting, unaudited, estate of Thomas Carter. I opened it with Timmy at the table. The index promised neatness, assets, liabilities, distributions, administrative costs. It was the kind of order Jonathan loved. Columns meant to hypnotize, but accounting isn't a museum. It's a confession when you read it slowly enough. We read slowly. Line 14, deposit $250,000, July 14, 2003, temporary holding. Line 21, administrative fee $48,000, August 2, 2003. Line 23, legal fees $62,500, August 12, 2003. Line 31, distribution to beneficiary Jonathan Carter $120,000, September 1, 2003. Line 32, distribution to beneficiary Mason Carter, $0. Timmy stared at that last line like it might change if he blinked enough. 0, he whispered. 0, I said. And then we circled it in red, because sometimes justice starts with the shape of a single number. We matched their fees and distributions against the citizen statements and the Fleet Ballet records. Transfers lined up like dominoes. Only the labels had been changed to look polite. Laundering by stationery, that's what James called it. When we finished reconciling, the accounting looked less like a ledger and more like a blueprint of theft. Miss Connors filed our objections to accounting on July 18th, attaching a forensic reconciliation exhibit A, dates, amounts, account endings, teller IDs, book and page citations. It ran 22 pages and ended with one simple prayer for relief. Compel full audited accounting, surcharge the fiduciary, restore misappropriated assets, refer for investigation. That night, Timmy and I sat on the back steps, the spot where the shovel had first struck metal. Fireflies stitched the yard with quiet light. Do you think Grandpa would be proud? He asked. I think he'd be relieved, I said. Pride is loud. Relief is what comes after the noise. On July 22nd, the Board of Bar Overseers acknowledged receipt of Miss Connor's informational notice. A single sterile sentence in black type: "We have opened a preliminary inquiry." The lawyer who had once smiled at my father's funeral had hired counsel by morning. Jonathan, once the gravity in every room, was now a man orbiting paperwork he couldn't bend. But the fallout wasn't only about headlines and letters. On July 25th, Mrs. Callahan knocked on our door with a pie blueberry, her way of blessing a fight well fought. She stood in the doorway longer than necessary, cheeks pink. "I should Seb said something in 2003, she murmured. "I thought it wasn't set my place." I said, "Sorry, Mason." I took the pie and shook my head. "You spoke when it counted." She smiled like someone had forgiven her for something she'd held alone for years. On July 27th, an email slid into my inbox from a name I hadn't seen in 7 years, my ex-wife. The subject was a single line: "I'm sorry we didn't know." The message itself was short, careful. She'd seen the article, seen the documents, wanted me to know she understood more now about the fights we'd had over money, about the nights I worked and the bills that never made sense. I read it twice and didn't respond that night. Some doors don't need slamming or swinging wide. Sometimes you just rest your hand on the frame and breathe. Timmy saw the sender name and searched my face for regret. "You okay?" "I am," I told him honestly, "because this isn't set about going back. It's set about finally standing where we should have been." The practical consequences piled up the way summer laundry does. Every day another small victory. July 28th. Court approved our subpoena to Bank of America for the 9,921 account. Full statements, signature cards, IP logs on electronic transfers from 2003, all of it. July 30th, the court set a status conference for August 14th, judge noting potential surcharge and referral. The clerk's voice over the phone sounded almost cheerful when she confirmed the date, like a tide finally turning the right direction on a stubborn river. And yet, in the middle of all that forward motion, there was also quiet repair. Timmy and I put fresh shelves in the basement and labeled boxes not with grief but with simple words: garden, tools, holiday. We restrung the porch light that had sagged for years. He played me a new riff he'd learned on his guitar, something bright, defiant. I made spaghetti the way his mother used to, with too much basil and a squeeze of lemon at the end. We weren't celebrating, we were reclaiming. On August 1st, a thin envelope arrived from Jonathan's counsel. Inside, a supplemental accounting admitted to a clerical oversight regarding beneficiary distributions and imprecision in legal fees. There it was again, the language of men who don't apologize, only recalibrate. They attached a cashier's check made payable to the estate of Thomas Carter, $250,000 plus interest at 3% simple. It looked heavy in my hands and lighter than ash in my heart. I took it to the bank with Miss Connor's paralegal. We deposited it into the estate trust account under court supervision, the teller stamping receipt #881104, August 1st, 2025, 2:26 p.m. Timmy watched me sign, his hand resting on my arm. "Not a trophy," I said quietly, more to myself than to him. "A restoration." That night, I stood in the backyard where this began, the shovel still leaning against the fence like an old sentinel. The cicadas sang, the porch light glowed soft. I thought of the phrase that had carried me for weeks: no drama, just math. And then another rose up, something my father used to say when a job finally came right: measure twice, cut once. We had measured and measured and measured, and now the cut was clean. The fallout left scars, public ones, private ones. But it also left room. Room for Timmy to look at me without questions caught behind his teeth. Room for my father's memory to sit at the table without turning bitter. Room for me to sleep through the night and wake up with the simple hunger of a man who has breakfast to make and a son to ask about college tours. Justice doesn't erase betrayal. It introduces air where mold once grew. It doesn't give you back the years, but it changes the math on the years ahead. And in that quiet arithmetic, I found something that felt a lot like peace. August 14th arrived warm and bright, the kind of day that mocks anyone who thinks justice is sterile. The courthouse steps shimmered in the summer heat as I climbed them with Timmy by my side, our files tucked under one arm, our purpose heavier than any folder could hold. Inside courtroom 4, Judge O'Malley presided again, the air humming with expectation. Jonathan sat at the respondent's table, shoulders tighter than I'd ever seen, his attorney pale and frayed. For years they'd carried themselves as architects of control. Today they looked like tenants waiting for eviction. The clerk called the matter. Estate of Thomas Carter. Status conference on petition to compel accounting. Miss Connors stood first. Calm, precise. Your Honor, Petitioner Mason Carter submits objections to Respondent's preliminary and supplemental accountings, Exhibits A through G. The records demonstrate self-dealing, missing inventory, and improper transfers to accounts jointly held with counsel. Petitioner respectfully requests surcharge, restoration, and referral. The judge nodded, flipping through our packet, the bank statements, the deed with its expired notary, the reconciled spreadsheet, the affidavits. He tapped the Fleet BOA account page with his pen. This joint account troubles me greatly. Jonathan Sepp's lawyer rose, sweat beading at his temple. Your Honor, any irregularities were inadvertent. Fees were billed in good faith. The supplemental accounting includes restitution with interest. There is no need for further action. The Judge Hub's gaze sharpened. Restitution does not erase breach of duty, nor does it absolve concealment. He leaned forward. Mr. Carter, do you have anything to say for yourself? Jonathan rose slowly. His voice, once smooth, now cracked at the edges. I did what I thought was best for the estate. I handled matters efficiently. My brother never asked questions. Enough. The judge cut him off. Fiduciary duty is not optional. Beneficiaries should not have to ask to be told the truth. It is the fiduciary's obligation to disclose. His gavel struck lightly. Once. The ruling came swift, steady, final. This court orders the following. Respondent Jonathan Carter is surcharged in the amount of $250,000 principal plus $147,500 interest at statutory rate, compounded from July 14, 2003. Respondent shall pay attorney's fees of petitioner in full, subject to court approval of submitted billing. The deed executed August 21, 2003 is declared voidable due to invalid acknowledgement and breach of fiduciary duty. Title to the Willow Street property is restored to the estate of Thomas Carter pending distribution. This matter is referred to the Attorney General Sipps's office for investigation of fraud and to the Board of Bar Overseers for review of counsel Sipps's conduct. The gavel came down hard. Boom. The room erupted, reporters scribbling, whispers colliding like waves. Jonathan slumped, his gray suit suddenly just fabric on a withered frame. His attorney stared down at the table, as if words might sink into wood and rescue him. I sat still, the words echoing in me: surcharge, property restored, referral. Years of silence had just been rewritten in a single paragraph of law. Outside, the courthouse steps pulsed with cameras again. This time I didn't flinch. Timmy gripped my arm as microphones thrust forward. "What do you say to your brother?" a reporter shouted. I spoke clearly, the July heat burning steady on my face. This was never about revenge. It was about responsibility. My father Sipps's voice was silenced in 2003. Today the court let it be heard. Another asked, "Do you feel victorious?" I shook my head. Justice isn't set victory, it's set balance. And today balance was restored. That night I returned to Willow Street for the first time in years. The house stood as it always had, brick solid, windows glowing with evening light. A court officer met me at the gate, papers in hand. Property restored to estate custody. You'll be appointed co-personal representative pending distribution. I walked through the door, every creak of the floorboards whispering memories, Christmas trees, birthday balloons, my father's laughter echoing down the hall. The room smelled of lemon polish and time. I set my hand on the banister, steadying myself. Timmy walked in behind me, eyes wide. "This feels like Grandpa's again," he said softly. "It does," I whispered, "and soon it'll be yours." 2 weeks later, the restitution check cleared. Receipt #902211, August 27, 2025. Estate trust account, funds restored, interest included. Miss Connors filed a motion for final distribution, half to me, half to Jonathan, though his share would be offset by the surcharge, leaving him nothing. The wheel had turned full circle, math erasing arrogance. I watched Timmy as he read the notice. He didn't sit to ask about numbers. He asked, "Does this mean we can finally move on?" "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "Because justice doesn't give us back the past. It gives us a future." The last time I saw Jonathan before sentencing came at the courthouse lobby. He stood alone, tie undone, eyes hollow. For a moment he looked like the boy I'd once known. "My brother, not my rival." He muttered, "You ruined me." I met his gaze. "No, you ruined yourself. I just turned on the lights." I walked away, and this time he didn't follow. Back home, Timmy and I sat on the porch, cicadas humming in the late summer air. The house, our house, felt lighter, freer. He leaned against me, guitar on his lap, plucking a tune that sounded like hope. I whispered what I whispered been carrying since the day the shovel hit metal. "You didn't too lose me, Jonathan. You gave me away, and I've taken myself back." Justice wasn't loud that night. It was quiet, steady, a hum under the stars. The kind of justice you don't shout about, you breathe. September settled over Boston like a quilt. Cool mornings, leaves beginning to copper at the edges, the air filled with that faint wood smoke that always made my father hum when he'd light the first fire of the season. For the first time in years, the house felt like it belonged to us, not to secrets. The safe downstairs was still full of folders, but they no longer felt like weapons. They felt like history, finished, filed, and finally put to rest. Timmy and I sat on the porch one evening, a pair of mugs steaming between us. He strummed his guitar absently. The melody soft, steady. "It sets strange," he said. "How quiet it feels now, like we were living inside a storm. And someone just turned it off." I nodded. "That seps the sound of justice, son. It isn't seps fireworks. It seps silence after thunder." I thought about Jonathan, what remained of him. His attorney had resigned under investigation. His name whispered in legal circles with words like fraud and surcharge. Jonathan himself had retreated, stripped of the townhouse, his reputation, and most of his money. A younger me would have wanted more: handcuffs, orange jumpsuits, the clang of a cell door. But standing here, watching my son's fingers glide across guitar strings, I realized justice had already done its work. It had taken the lies off our shoulders, cleared space for truth. I remembered walking out of courtroom 4, reporters shouting, cameras flashing, Jonathan shrinking, and I remembered Timmy's hand gripping mine. That moment mattered more than any headline, because justice hadn't just reclaimed a house or money, it had reclaimed us. Some nights I found myself wandering through the Willow Street townhouse. The court had appointed me co-representative, and while the lawyers handled the formal distribution, I took care of the house. Dusting, boxing up Jonathan's things, setting aside what belonged to Dad. In the attic, I found a cedar chest I hadn't opened in decades. Inside were photo albums, birthdays, graduations, Christmas mornings, Jonathan and me as boys chasing each other across that same lawn where Timmy's shovel had struck the tin box. I stared at those photos for a long time. The betrayal hadn't erased those memories, but it had poisoned them. Now, though, I felt something different. Not forgiveness. Not yet, but distance. Like the photos belonged to a different lifetime, a different Mason, a different Jonathan. One Sunday afternoon, Timmy asked me, "Dad, do you regret it? Not just what Jonathan did, but all of this going to court, digging it all up?" I set my coffee down, thought carefully. "No," I said. "I regret the years stolen from us. But I don't regret the fight, because the fight taught me something important." "What seps that?" "The justice isn't set about destroying someone else. It sets about refusing to let them destroy you." He nodded slowly, letting that sink in. Then he smiled faintly. "Sounds like something Grandpa would have said." "Maybe," I admitted. "But now it sets ours." The last step came quietly. On September 18th, 2025, the probate court entered its final decree of distribution. Half the estate restored to me, half technically to Jonathan, offset entirely by surcharge. Net to Jonathan 0. Net to me, the house, the funds, and the dignity of a ledger finally balanced. The decree carried a docket stamp. Receipt hash 913077, time stamped 3:42 p.m. I slid it into the safe, though I knew I didn't need to. That single page lived in me now more securely than any lock. That evening I cooked dinner, spaghetti with too much basil, just the way Timmy liked. We ate at the old oak table, the same one I'd once buried in papers and bourbon, the one where I'd nearly collapsed from the weight of betrayal. Now it held nothing but plates, laughter, and the steady rhythm of forks clinking gently. Timmy looked up mid-bite. So, what happens next? I leaned back, watching him, pride swelling in my chest. Next, you graduate. You live your life without carrying someone else Sips's lies. And me? I smiled. I finally breathed. Later that night, I sat alone in the backyard. The shovel still leaned against the fence, rust streaking its handle. The ground where we dug had grown over, grass reclaiming the scar. I thought of that day, Timmy's voice. My friend told me to dig here, the tin box breaking the soil. The papers inside. A ghost had pointed us to truth, or maybe just a son's intuition sharpened by years of silence. Either way, it had led us here. I closed my eyes, whispered into the warm September dark. You didn't lose me, Dad. Jonathan gave me away, but I found my way back. The cicadas buzzed. The stars blinked awake, and for the first time in 22 years I felt steady. Not waiting for a fight, not bracing for betrayal, just steady. Justice isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's the quiet of your own porch, the laughter of your son drifting through an open window, the certainty that the story ends with balance. I used to think betrayal defined me, but I was wrong. It tested me, it scarred me, and it taught me the most important truth of all. That revenge isn't fire, it's light. And once you shine it, the darkness doesn't come back.